Hello everyone, I hope you all are doing well. So today we will be analyzing the different type of fingerprints. Let us first of all have a look at the type of fingerprints, that is fingerprint classification. So basically there are four types of fingerprints, namely loop, arc, whirl and accidental. In loops the ridges make a backward turn but they do not twist. Ridges are the lines on the fingerprint. The second type of fingerprint is arc. In arcs, the ridges of the finger run continuous from one side of the finger to the other with no recurving. So in loop they do not twist, they make a backward turn but they do not twist. Whereas in arc, they move from one side of the finger to the other but they do not recurve. The third type of fingerprint is whirl. In whirls, there are patterns in which there are two or more delta and there exists a recurve preceding each delta. The fourth type of fingerprint is accidental. In accidental, there are patterns found in fingerprints which are a combination of arc, loop or whirl. Basically, in accidental, the fingerprints, there is no particular dominant fingerprint type. There is a combination of arc, loop and whirl. So these were the four types of fingerprints. We will be discussing about each of them in detail along with their subtypes. But before that, let us have a look at the percentage. The loop are basically 45 to 48%, which means that in the entire world, the person having this type of fingerprint, that is the loop fingerprint, are around 45 to 48%. 45 to 48%. The persons having arc type of fingerprint are 7 to 8%. The persons having whirl fingerprint comprise of 45% of the entire population of the world, and accidental are generally 1% in the total percentage. Basically, this is the percentage distribution of fingerprint type that people in all around the world have. Now moving forward, here you can have a diagrammatic image of the different type of fingerprints. So the first one is arc, the second being loop and the third one being whirl. You can easily identify them with having a reference to the description given in the previous slide. Now moving forward, let us have a look at the subtype of fingerprints. So the four type of fingerprints discussed in the previous slide were the broad heads. All of those heads have various subtypes. So now we are going to discuss all those subtypes. So the first one is loop. The first subtype of loop is ulnar loop. So in this pattern, the ridges turn backward but they do not make a full turn. To identify an ulnar loop, you will notice the loops moving towards the small finger. So although they turn backward but they do not make a full turn. And in order to, you can easily identify it, that is you can easily identify an ulnar loop because in this particular case the loops move towards the small finger. The second one is the radial loop. This pattern is similar to the ulnar loop, but the difference is the turn points in this loop is towards the thumb instead of the small finger. So in ulnar loop, the loop move towards the small finger, whereas in radial loop they move towards the thumb instead of the small finger. The next is ulnar falling loop, and the fourth one is the radial falling loop. We will be discussing about each of them and how to identify them in further part of this presentation. We will be discussing about them in detail. Now moving forward, we have subtype of arc. So the first one is simple arc. This pattern has a consistency of flow to it. It starts on one side of the finger and then continues its journey along the finger to the other side. It is the simplest of the fingerprint patterns to recognize. So it moves from one side of the fingerprint and then continues its journey along the finger to the other side. We will also be having a diagrammatic presentation of all these type of fingerprints, a diagrammatic view of all these type of fingerprints, so that will make you much more clear about the different type of fingerprints that we have. The next is tented arc. So tented arc patterns, as their name suggests, are shaped like the top of a tent. This was pretty simple, I guess. The next one is tented arc with ulnar loop, and the fourth one is the tented arc with radial loop. As I said earlier that we will be discussing about all of these type of fingerprints and their subtypes in detail in the forward parts of this presentation. Now the next is subtype of whorl. So there are different types of whorl, basically target centric whorl, spiral, elongated whorl with target centric, elongated whorl with spiral, double loop whorl, composite, imploding, ulnar target centric peacock's eye, radial target centric peacock's eye, ulnar spiral peacock's eye, and radial spiral peacock's eye. So these were the subtype of whorl. Now the fourth one is accidental. So there are in this category there are two subtypes, basically accidental and accidental whorl. So accidental in accidental it is a combination of arc, loop and whorl, and basically there is no dominant fingerprint type in that particular case, because of which it is named as such. It is named as accidental. Then secondly we have accidental whorl. In this, the composition of the pattern in accidental whorl is derived from two distinct types of pattern that have at least two delta. Therefore, whorls containing ridges that match the characteristics of a particular whorl subgrouping are referred to as accidental whorls. So this was about accidental. Now let us see the fingerprint pattern codes. So each type of fingerprint is identified an individual code, a distinct code. Now let us see the different type of pattern codes that have been allotted to the different fingerprint types in order to better identify them. The first one is the ulnar loop. In this case, if we take example of the left hand, so the ridges start from left hand. They start from left side and they move towards the left. The flow is towards the left. Whereas in case of the right hand, the ridges start from the right side and they flow towards the right side. So basically, this was the point. This is how we identify an ulnar loop. And depending upon whether it is a left hand scan or right hand scan, we can identify it. And the point to be noted here is that in case of ulnar loop, the delta is Y-shaped. You can see in the picture that over here that there is a delta. It has been named in the picture. It is Y-shaped, and the core is the center. Over here, you can also see the core. That is the center of the fingerprint. In this, we need to learn to identify core and delta for each fingerprint type, so that we can use auto-ridge counting software to prepare DMIT report. So we should be very particular, we should be very clear on how to identify core and delta, because only then we can use them in the auto-ridge counting software to prepare a DMIT report and to prepare a more accurate DMIT report, I would say. Okay, so now moving forward, the fingerprint code that has been allotted, or you can say that has been that needs to be updated if there is an ulnar loop, is L. Over here, in case of radial loop, the fingerprint code to be updated will be R. Next that we have is ulnar falling loop. In ulnar falling loop, again the flow in case of left hand scan, it starts from the left side and flow is also towards the left side. The only difference between ulnar falling loop and ulnar loop is that in case of ulnar falling loop, the flow will be of a heart shape, and in case of a right hand scan, the ridges, the lines will start from right side and they will move towards, the flow will be also towards the right side, the only difference being that the flow will be a heart shaped. And again, in this case, the delta is Y shaped. And the fingerprint code to be updated in case of ulnar falling loop is L1. Now we have radial falling loop. Again, it is similar to the radial loop, the only difference being that the flow will be of a heart shape. So in case of a left hand scan, the ridges, the flow will be towards the right side and the flow will be heart shaped. And in case of a right hand scan, the flow will be towards the left side and it will be a heart shape. And again the delta will be Y-shaped in this particular type of fingerprint as well. Also the fingerprint code to be updated here is R1. Now let us quickly have a review in how to differentiate or how to identify an ulnar and a radial loop. Basically how to differentiate between the two. So here I've made a summary which it would be easier for you to understand and to differentiate between the ulnar and the radial loop. So if it is a left hand sprint and the flow is also in the left, that is left and left match, in that particular case it is an ulnar loop. Second is if it's a right hand print, that is the fingerprint is of a right hand and the flow is also in the right, that is right and right match, again it is an ulnar loop. The third one is that if it is a left hand scan, that is a left hand fingerprint and the flow is in the right, that is left and right do not match, in that case it is a radial loop. The fourth one is right hand print and flow is in left, that is again the right and left do not match, so again it will be a radial loop. I guess now it would have been a bit more clear in how to differentiate between ulnar and radial loop. Now moving forward, as you can see over here, in simple arc we have a flat curvature, whereas in tented arc the curvature is a bit elevated. Also the ridges start from one side, lift at the center and end at the other side. So there is a flow obviously, and the tented arc will look like a tent. As you can see in the image, it is shaped like a tent. Again it is similar, this point again the last point being similar to the simple arc. Again in this case that is the tented arc, again you will only have to note down the pattern and the ridge count will always be 0. And the fingerprint code to be updated is X2. Next we have is arc with ulnar loop. Basically it is like loop. Okay, it is like an ulnar loop that we had studied, that we have seen in the previous slide. That is, it will be like ulnar loop with a delta and the flow. The only difference over here is that the ridge count, that is the number of lines between the delta and the center, will be less than 9. So basically an arc with ulnar loop will be similar to an ulnar loop. The only difference is that the ridge count over here in this case will be less than 9. And also if the left hand sprint and the flow is also on the left side, again it will be an arc with ulnar loop. The fingerprint code to be updated here in this case is X3. Next is arc with radial loop. Again it will be like a loop, that is with the delta and flow, but the only difference is that the ridge count will be less than 9. It is also similar to a radial loop. Again, as I said, it is similar to a radial loop. The only difference being that in this case, that is in arc with radial loop, the ridge count will be less than 9. And again the same thing, that if it is a left hand print or left hand scan and the flow is in the right side, then it will be termed as arc with radial loop. And obviously the vice versa, that is if it is a right hand print and the flow is in the left side, again it will be a radial loop, that is an arc with radial loop, if it satisfies the condition, that is the ridge count is less than 9. The fingerprint code to be updated here is X4. So I have already mentioned that if it is a right hand sprint and the flow is on the left side, it will be an arc with the radial loop, provided the ridge count is less than 9, and the fingerprint code to be updated will be X4. Now let us quickly see that how to differentiate between an arc with ulnar loop and an arc with radial loop. So here you can see in a tabular form, that is if it is a left hand fingerprint and the flow is also in the left, that is left and left match, so it will be an ulnar loop arc, or you can say an arc with ulnar loop. Second is if it is a right hand fingerprint and the flow is also in the right, that is right and right match. Again, it will be an unlearned loop arc, or you can say an arc with an unlearned loop. The third is if it is a left hand fingerprint and the flow is in the right, that is left and right do not match, it will be a radial loop arc. The fourth is if it is a right hand print and the flow is in the left, that is again the right and left do not match, it will be a radial loop arc. Further moving forward, that is in case of a target centric whorl, the center was a dot shape, whereas in case of a spiral whorl, as you can also see from the image, that it has got a connected center that is attached with the next ridge, right? Also in this particular type of fingerprint, the delta is shaped like Y, and the ridges come from one direction, and at one point they are split. So they will start from one direction and they will split at one point. The ridges start from the center of the fingerprint in a circular manner. So also in this case, the ridges move around the center in a circular manner. Also in case of spiral whorl, we have two deltas and one center, as you can also see in the image. And the fingerprint code to be updated in this case is W2. The next type of fingerprint that we have is elongated whorl. It could either be target or spiral. In this case again, the delta is shaped like Y. The ridges or the lines come from one direction, and at one point they are split, as you can clearly see in the image. Elongated whorl is a stretched form of a target centric or spiral whorl. So either it could be a stretched form of target centric or the spiral whorl. The ridges are around the center in a stretched form. You can also see in the image the ridges are, the center is a bit elongated as compared to the previous target or spiral whorl, and the ridges are around the center because the center is in a stretched form, so the ridges are also around the center in a bit stretched form. It can be spiral or target centric, having two delta and one center. It could be an elongated target, or it could be either an elongated spiral whorl. If the center is target centric, that is if it is an elongated target centric, the code that we have to update is W3. And if the center is of a spiral type, if it is an elongated spiral type center, as you can see in the image that has been placed in the example, the code will be W4. This was all about the elongated whorl, right? You can see over here that the shape of S, that the S shape that you noticed would be a bit bigger in size in these two cases as compared to composite whorl, right? So this was about composite whorl. The fingerprint code to be updated here is W7. Peacock's eye is that in this case, that is unlearned spiral peacock's eye, the center will be joined. You can see it in the image, right? In this case, if it is a left hand print and the flow is also towards the left, it will be termed as unlearned spiral peacock's eye. Similarly, if it is a right hand print and flow is also on the right side, it will be termed again as unlearned spiral peacock's eye. However, the image that we have taken or used in this particular slide is a left hand fingerprint. So this was all about unlearned spiral peacock's eye. The fingerprint code to be updated over here is W9. Next we have is radial target centric peacock's eye. Again, in this case, there will be two deltas. One delta will be at its place and second delta will be close to the center. It will form a peacock's feather shape from the center. The only difference in this case and the ones that we discussed earlier in the previous slides is that in this case, if it is a left hand sprint and the flow is towards the right, it is termed as radial peacock's eye. And if it is a right hand sprint and the flow is on the left side, it is termed as radial peacock's eye. The image shown in this slide, or the image displayed here, is of a left hand fingerprint or a left hand scan, you can say. The fingerprint code to be updated in this case is W10. It it was all about the different type of wall that we have, the subtype of wall fingerprint. Now the next type of fingerprint that we have is accidental. In this case we have two, that is accidental and accidental wall. First let us have a brief or read the brief about them. It says that they have two or more deltas and a combination of fusion of two or more types of patterns. It could either be arc or loop or whirl. This category also includes any freak pattern or accidental formation that does not conform to any conventional type, right? So there are two, as I said, one is accidental and the other is accidental whirl. The image on the left hand side, as you can see, is accidental. It is a fingerprint which represents many fingerprints. Okay, the fingerprint code to be updated here is it will be based on the most dominant fingerprint type that is visible. In the image given below, it is loop, so the code will be L. So accordingly, whichever is the most dominant fingerprint type that is visible in the particular scan, the code will be based on that. The next that we have is accidental whirl. As you can see the image that is on the right hand side, accidental whirl is a fingerprint which is a misformation of whorls, right? And the fingerprint code to be updated in this case is W. This was all about accidental and accidental whirl. Now moving forward, let us now discuss some of the characteristics. Basically the characteristics that people possess with a particular fingerprint type that we have discussed in the previous slides. So now let us have a quick look at the characteristics of the people with a particular type of fingerprint. The first in the list is ulnar loop. So the people who have this type of fingerprint, that is ulnar loop, the characteristics possessed by them are generally seen to be, they are seen to be more people oriented. They are considered as team player. They are flexible. They're emotional, sensitive, cooperative. They avoid confrontation. They avoid conflict. So these are the characteristics that are observed in the people having ulnar loop. Next is radial loop. So the people having this type of fingerprint, that is radial loop, are considered to be reverse thinker. They are generally seen to have out of the box ideas. They are generally very creative. They do not follow tradition. They are considered to be rule breaker, milestone setter, impatient and curious. So these are the characteristics that are generally observed in people having this kind of fingerprint, that is radial loop. Next is ulnar and radial falling loop. So the people with this type of fingerprint are considered to be highly responsive and insightful. Thought process usually has its ups and downs. That is they have a conflicting, you can say, or their thought process generally sees a lot of ups and downs. This was about ulnar and radial falling loop. Next is arc. So the people having arc type of fingerprint are generally considered, or they are generally observed to be hardworking, introvert. They are cautious towards things. They like to follow steps. They work without any complaints. They are considered to be down to earth individuals, and they do not like to take risks. This is a general, these are the general traits that are observed in such people. That is the people having arc type of fingerprint. Now we have tented arc. So the people who have this type of fingerprint, that is tented arc, are observed to have, or you can say are considered to have, absolutely extreme personalities. That is, they can be outgoing one day and they will be shy the other day. They are inconsistent in doing things. They are generally observed to be creative in whatever task that they undertake. They are not afraid of challenges and they may be impulsive at times. So this was about people, or you can say these are the characteristics that are generally observed in the people having this type of fingerprint, that is tented arc. Next is tented arc with ulnar loop. So such people are generally very creative, they're observed to be impatient, and also they are seen to possess high observation skills. So this was about tinted arc with ulnar loop. The characteristics of the people with this type of fingerprint, right? Next that we have is tented arc with radial loop. So the people that have such type of fingerprints, that they are generally considered to be impatient, rule breaker, and impulsive. That is, they are considered at times to take certain decisions without giving a careful thought to it, and they are generally at times they are rule breakers. That is, they do not follow rules. These are the characteristics that are generally observed in such people. Next is target centric whorl and spiral whorl. So the people who have such type of fingerprints are generally, they are more focused, they are goal oriented, they are self centric, inflexible, they are confident in whatever they do, bold, aggressive, they are determined, they possess strong self consciousness, and they are eager to win. So these are the characteristics that such people possess. Next is elongated target and spiral whorl. Such people are generally seen to be ambitious, competitive, they hate to be defeated, they are stubborn, and they are bold in whatever task that they undertake. Next we have is double loop and imploding type of fingerprint. So the people or the persons who have such type of fingerprint are generally observed to have the following characteristic. They're seen to be curious, planner, reliable, they are logical thinkers, perfectionist, they focus on accuracy, they are rule lovers, that is, they like to follow rules, they like structure and diverse approach. So these are the traits that are generally observed in such people. Next is composite whorl. So the people who have this type of fingerprint, that is composite whorl, are generally seen to be adaptive. That is, they adapt to different circumstances, they have different thinking, that is they try to think out of the box, they have different thinking. They are considered to be situational decision maker, that is, they take a decision based upon the situation that they are in or that they face. They possess good communication skills and good coordination skills. Next is ulnar target centric peacock's eye. Such people are generally considered to be expressive, highly perceptive, they possess leadership qualities, they are artistic and goal oriented, as well as inflexible. These are the traits possessed by such people who have ulnar target centric peacock's eye type of fingerprint. Next is ulnar spiral peacock's eye. So the characteristics of such people, or the traits seen in the people who have this type of fingerprint are, they are generally seen to be passionate in whatever they do, they are artistic, they are enthusiastic, creative, and they are seen to have or possess good observation skills. Next is radial target centric peacock's eye. So such people are generally observed to be highly inflexible, stubborn, competitive, and goal oriented. These were the traits that are observed in the people who have this particular type of fingerprint. It was all about the characteristics of the people with different type of fingerprints. Now let us have a quick review at the coding system for preparing a report. Although we have seen it earlier along when we have discussed about the different type of fingerprints and their subtypes in detail, now let us have a quick review. So here I have, in a tabular form, basically in a summary format. So on the left hand side we have the fingerprint type, and on the right hand side we have the code that are to be allotted in the case of a particular fingerprint type. So the first one being target centric, the code will be W1. In case of spiral, it is W2. Elongated target centric, it is W3. Elongated spiral, it is W4. Double loop it is W5, imploding, it is W6, composite, it is W7, unlayer target centric peacock's eye, W8, unlayer spiral peacock's eye, W9, radial target centric peacock's eye, W10, radial spiral peacock's eye, W11, unlayer loop L, radial loop R, unlayer falling loop L1, radial falling loop R1, simple arc X1, tented arc X2, tented arc with unlayer loop X3, tented arc with radial loop X4, accidental whirl W, and in case of accidental, the code to be allotted will be the code of the most dominant fingerprint type that is visible in the particular scan. So that was all about analyzing fingerprint types and the codes that are to be allotted to them while preparing the DMIT report. So that was all about it. Thank you so much. Thank you for your time. Thank you.